Hey, welcome to the CTO Studio this week. This is our conversation about marketing automation tools, what you as CTO need to do and know about this. We talk to Ryan Willemsen.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see. It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Ryan Willemsen. Welcome to the
Thank
CTO
you.
Studio. Is it Willemsen?
I never heard anybody pronounce it like that. It's Dutch, so
That is the pronunciation. Well, you're
did I
welcome.
correctly.
Willemsen.
Thank you. I actually don't speak any Dutch and have
But-
not been to Holland.
Really?
I know this is actually.
Now, how do you pronounce it?
I go with Willemsen.
Willemsen.
Yeah.
So
hmm
we have our Dutch friend in the office next door. We can go and validate my pronunciation.
Yeah. No, let's go do that. I feel bad. I left my clogs at home today, so I'm not going to seem authentic. Plus, I'm short, so I don't know how I got that.
Willemsen. So we met at a co-working space.
Yep.
What was your first impression of me?
I'd say somewhat poorly kempt.
Yes,
Yeah. A bit
A bit
maybe
brash.
a few sandwiches short of a picnic, that type of thing. But
Yes.
getting there, assembling the picnic.
Okay, so you felt
Yeah.
like there was progress when you saw me, or
Yeah, exactly. I'm
just
like,
deterioration?
no. I felt like there was probably, you were putting something back together that maybe falling apart. How about that?
Putting something back together. Wow, how true. That's incredibly perceptive.
I am a perceptive individual.
My whole world had fallen.
I know, yeah.
And you're on the show because the CTO Studio isn't really a self-indulgent conversation between CTOs.
Great.
It's really the types of conversations I would want to have as a tech leader, CTO, and I feel especially people like you who are in the product management space, supremely valuable to have sort of domain conversations so that the listeners can sort of learn from people like you who otherwise they would never be seen dead with you.
I know, right? They'd be like, he's recommending soap? Or get out of here. I don't recommend soap.
Yes. So tell me.
Not soap for cleaning. They were
Soap
talking
for the paper. Thank you. From the 90s. I actually did soap integration with PayPal back in the day.
There you go.
So you're currently at an insurance tech company.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role and sort of what the company does and what your role is as product manager?
Yeah. So what we do is we focus on life insurance, specifically permanent life insurance. So your standard life insurance you think of is like, I'm going to get life insurance for 20 years. If I die, my family gets $1 million. There we go. There's another market, which is permanent life insurance, which is not like 20 years or 30 years of coverage. It's permanent. But a lot of it is actually used for wealth accumulation. So you can get this stuff so it like is linked to the S&P 500, and the value of the policy grows over time based on stock market increase in the stock market. You can put more money into it, and you're able to pull money out of it on a tax preferred basis. So it's this complex world that's really much more in the investment space. So we deal with those life insurance products.
So
Permanent.
permanent.
Yeah.
Is it called perm? I think I've heard
They
of that.
do actually call it perm, yeah.
And so in other words, instead of having it term out at 20 years, you're just basically paying into something in perpetuity.
More or less. I mean, you could do a slug of cash and just let it grow. You could pay over the long term, but the whole point is it sits there for an extended period.
And this obviously opens up all kinds of investment opportunities for companies like yours.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what do you guys do?
So what we're doing is we're kind of building pieces along the, let's say the usage funnel really in the life insurance space. So the first thing we were live with, we rolled out last year, is a visualization platform. So a lot of these policies are pretty complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. And so trying to explain them, you can pull out these quotes for these things, and they're really like actually like legitimately a 40-page document with these giant tables and all that stuff.
I've seen those.
Yeah. So what we do is we tap into an aggregator's API, pull data from quotes from there, and then we're able to visually display them in graphs. That makes them a lot easier to compare and contrast different policies. So the first tool is it's called the Insight Visualization Platform, and it's made for point of sale work. These people called wholesalers as well, people who are interacting and trying to explain to clients and compare and contrast plans.
So you're sitting at the desk, you've got a client across from you, and you're wanting to talk about the plans. You pull up your tech, and you can clearly see in a plain, simple way the differences between the different plans.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I recently went through this, and my broker, I think it was a nightmare. I mean, I didn't understand half the things she was saying to me. And, trying to figure out what, in the end, you have to trust that your broker, go by, I'm not going to pick from this menu, just tell me what to eat kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's really where people have been for a long time, because you're not going to understand it. But it makes people kind of nervous if you're plopping down a lot of cash. And so if you can help build customer understanding, you tend to have a much higher probability of closing a sale, and customers are a lot happier because they know what they're buying. So if you can just show with a few graphs, be like, hey, look, the value goes up over time like this. These are the potential outcomes, a couple things like that, versus just wading through miles of legalese and documents and stuff. It's like,
is that aggregator API publicly available, or is it?
No, so it's actually a partnership.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's.
And you joined as a product manager.
It did, yeah.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about the role of the product manager in which aspect with this company?
Mm-hmm. So I'd actually done a bunch of projects with these guys in the past, and more on the analytics side. And then I ended up joining with them, last January. And so the product management role is at a startup, obviously, highly fluid. It's not like a structured product management role like you'd see at a much larger operation. But really, I think one of the best ways you could describe me is I'm probably the business side product manager. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely not spending a huge amount of time. I spend plenty of time with engineers, but I'm not like, a technical product manager for sure. So I spend an enormous amount of time with clients. At this point, I could, probably do the client's jobs as well as they can, or maybe not, but, I've really spent tons of time in-house with them, understanding their needs, learning about these products, and trying to make sure. I look at it as like my role is to shepherd the software through in a way that'll make us money and to make sure that we're deploying resources intelligently, not just, hey, what's the most awesome new thing we can like roll out in the tech stack, but what are we going to build that's going to create long-term value in this insurance space for us.
And do you have a technical product manager counterpart, or is that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a blend. So we have a guy who's like definitely a more technical product manager, and then we also have a CTO who's also in that role too, kind of as head of product. So we all kind of like switch hit, but we're rolling out other products. For this product, I'm really like the business lead and push things through with them.
And so is the CTO in San Diego?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the question that I have generally around product management is there an environment that the CTO creates that is good for product management, and is there an environment that is not great for it? And what have you seen works, and what have you seen doesn't work?
Yeah, I think it's an awesome question. I think that it can go all kinds of directions, and the most important thing is that there has to be good communication, right? Like, and that seems to be like it. You'd think it would be a given, but that's always the case everywhere I've been. When you have like technical and business people interacting, who's going to translate? Who's going to make sure everybody's on the same level, and make sure everybody's pulling in the same direction? So there's not good communication. You could have the engineering team, going off, spending a lot of time doing good stuff that has no real business application, and that is a huge risk. Like, you have smart people involved in all these disciplines, right? And if they don't spend the time to like sit down and break everything down and really make sure they're all going the right direction, you can easily end up with the wrong thing. So that's really common.
Mm. Do you get blamed a lot for advocating for features that you were super passionate about, but then didn't really have any impact?
No, I haven't ended up in that situation much, because the features we've rolled out, I spend so much time with the clients, and we like stack them in terms of like what level of requests are there for these features, like what kind of revenue impact we think there's going to be. Is there a way we can do a workaround? We think about them a good bit before we just start hammering features out.
And
what I don't like to do is just be like, that's a request, let's make it a feature. That is definitely not how I want to do things.
Yeah,
so.
And that's oftentimes what happens, right? Especially if you have a super flat organization, where the CEO could have access to devs, as an example. There could be confusion around the urgency of feature requests.
So I think we've done a much better job as we've matured, really building out good backlogs, a good sprint cycle, having some people who are like, gating factors. So I'm one of those gating factors on this product. Not saying that everything we build is perfect and totally understood by the users immediately, but we've had pretty good success by just, putting some process around that.
Are your clients that you're referring to those people that are showing potential customers the graphs?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's them, and there's a couple other folks in that stream, the people who generate the quotes and the folks who are showing the graph. So. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Willemsen journey?
Yeah.
You started.
Sit back because it's going to take a little while.
You started not in Holland.
Not in Holland. I'm from upstate New York.
Upstate New York is generally what people say when it's like a sleepy town. That's not New York City.
That's accurate. Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In my case, I'm from directly the center of New York State, a town called Ithaca.
Wow, what a name!
Yeah,
is that a traditional name?
I believe there is some sort of Greek tale associated with it. Yep. Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. So it's a unique place, actually. If you took Berkeley and sliced it out and stuck it in the middle of upstate New York, that is the exact same.
Wow.
I'm joking. The architecture is the same and everything.
That's amazing.
So went to State University in New York, studied economics and psychology. And then I ended up on Wall Street, just in time with the financial crisis for 5 years, which was quite interesting. So I actually worked in something called product control there, which was not a product management role, but you do actually work across a lot of different fields, a lot of different layers of expertise there. And I was at an investment bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, working with mortgage-backed security trading, which was on fire and taking the world down at that point. Moved over to a hedge fund, spent a little time there, and I was always involved in tech projects. Because I was like, why are we going to go ahead and copy and paste this interest, like the LIBOR curve, the 7,000th time this week? Again, can't we just get a computer to do this? And so I actually started like writing VBA. I was like, oh, look at Excel has the capability to do this. And so I got a little bit more involved in tech projects over time. I was still very, very involved in finance. But then I had a buddy who ran an SEO company. I was always being like, hey, man, I know you're really sick of dealing with these jerks on Wall Street. You should come work for me. And so the hedge fund folded. I decided it was time to do a little traveling. And then he was like, recruited me, pretty much forced me into running his SEO company while he started another one in Brazil. So SEO wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, this is what I want to do for my life. But I spent a little time running this SEO company, like 4 people. And it taught me so much, just running a small business, like coming, in the world of finances, doing all this complex analysis. And not like I was fancy. I was definitely a very low man on the totem pole being kicked around and chewed on. But, you get into very cerebral areas, and then you don't realize how important it is to make sure that everybody is on the same page with, like, a regular company, just making sure everybody's on the same page with like their project management documents. You just never see that, right? Like the complexity of running a small business. So did that for a bit. Then I started, we actually had some pretty legitimate clients, and I started getting involved with a lot of these funded startups and saying, hey.
Where is this?
This is I moved to San Diego at this point.
Okay.
Yep. So I was in New York, moved to San Diego, and started saying, hey, I don't really think any of our clients are doing a good job with their analytics. So started tying a lot of finance stuff into looking at marketing attribution and saying, you guys are pouring a massive amount of money into here and not measuring your return. So started actually kind of building out a business for myself, consulting in that space. So did that for a bit. Started a solar company that does customer acquisition. Built that out for a little while. And
which is it's sort of a low-hanging fruit given the climate where everyone was, there was just this boom of solar companies.
Huge.
Matched with your SEO prowess.
Right.
It's kind of
Which made
killer
a lot
combination.
Of sense. Exactly. So played around with that a bit, bootstrapped it to revenue. So that was exciting. Still have it. And, I don't like the unit economics of it overall at this point. Like maybe at some point I want to bump it up, but I still keep it on the side because it's my fun little experiment that I play around with and kicks off some cash. So yeah, did all that stuff and then came on with the current company, like I said, about 1.5 years ago.
Let's dwell a little bit on the SEO stuff. I remember one day I casually asked you about targeting, I think it was a CTO keywords or something. And the ensuing 30 minutes just made my head explode.
Blew your mind. That's what I do. Yeah.
Because I felt like you were pointing and clicking and dragging and dropping in ways that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
And this was
another dimension.
This was all in the Google Analytics control panel. What do you have some sort of go-to tips on when you're setting up Google Analytics? I always ignore all the conversion tracking and all the to me, Google Analytics is you just copy and paste that widget into your code and now it's tracking you.
So there's an interesting point where we can go down a pretty deep rabbit hole with this. So I've been involved in a lot of analytics projects, done a ton of work with Google Analytics. Yes and no. So one of the biggest issues now as we see this massive amount of data everywhere is that people assume it's going to come out in some usable form and be built correctly and structured correctly and have some sort of value. And a lot of the data that's being produced out there is just garbage. So for example, Google Analytics, it's pretty good to go out of the box, but it's not totally true. And let's say, for example, you forgot to ban your local IP that all your developers are using. You're like, God, we're just getting crazy amounts of direct traffic, but nobody's converting, or maybe they're all converting. And you're like, oh, how are we not, where are the leads going, So that right there is, there's tons of stuff that, there's tons of ways you could go wrong with it. But if you're running a B2C website, or just B2B too, actually it doesn't really matter B2C, but if you're just looking for basic tracking Google Analytics, as long as you ban your IPs and make sure you have a consistent deployment across your entire site, you should be more or less okay to do basic tracking. Now, with that tool, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go with it?
I want to go hard.
So let's go hard. So with the tool...
I just pointed the mic to Ryan's face.
Exactly. I'll just get closer to it. So with the tool... So you got to say, what do you want to get out of it? It's not something where you're going to have really complex app pathing. You can't really see really, really good user flows. There's a ghetto flow chart in it, but it's not, you're not this is amazing. If you're trying to diagnose drop-off points and stuff, you can get some basics out of it, but you're not going to have a really good good deployment. If you're trying to do something more complex, you should be doing mixed panel or something like that. But you have a regular website, nothing too crazy. You're putting out content. You're trying to understand the channels that are actually driving your conversions. Google Analytics is pretty good. Okay. So if you're are you doing a 7 CTOs website? Are you creating good content that's driving CTOs or other folks who are technically minded or whatever to actually read it and then come through and eventually fill out a, hey, contact me form? That type of thing is pretty good for.
And what about reverse engineering that where you say, I want to use Google Analytics to create good content? Is that a thing?
That's not the tool. but there's plenty of other tools out there you could do with that. So what you would do is you would want to tie Google Analytics in to say, oh, I created these 30 articles, spent all this time writing them, and it turns out only 2 of them get any traffic, or anybody actually goes anywhere else in the site besides bounce. Then you could say, oh, guess what? It turns out that that's like, what's the difference between like, I don't know, like, like Ruby and whatever, like .NET, right? Like maybe that's what everybody's actually interested in, and you've created all these other articles nobody cares about. So that would be a good way to say, okay, I should build more there. But it's not going to be the tool to say, what should I write about? There's a ton of other Google tools like Google AdWords, where if you start doing a lot of keyword research, what you can do is you can get a feel for what the overall search volumes are for all kinds of things. You could find like, what the cultural shifts are, if, like, you can see over time.
So I've noticed on that, is AdWords the only way to do that? Because I know when I run an AdWords on Google, I get to see the search phrases and like what people are, what phrase got them to my site.
Yeah, for AdWords you get to see it. For SEO, for organic traffic, they've blocked it just because they don't really want to give that information out. They'd much rather have you spend a lot of money on AdWords. Okay.
So they won't show you an organic search result, but they will show you the search phrase that led to a click on your ad.
Yeah, exactly.
Or an impression of your ad.
Yep. But you can kind of back into it. Like if it's like, if it's like the Ruby.net article, you're like, well, it's probably related to that, right? There's a lot of other tools out there if you go down the SEO rabbit hole, like SEMrush is a big one. SEMrush. So that, what you could do is you could take your page that the article we're talking about, throw it in there and see what it's ranking for. And what they're doing is they're scraping hundreds of millions of results. They have this massive, massive database of things that people search for. And then they're scraping results for Google result pages and then documenting, oh, this is number 7 position. This is number 45 position for like this website, and then what you can do is you can see your relative positions for different types of keywords. And then you'll see what people probably came to your site through.
And then, but it does. So, but none of that amounts to anything unless you're tracking conversion, right?
Yeah. If you just want to get traffic, you just want to get like mind share. Not such a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to track conversions, like did somebody come to 7 CTOs website and sign up for chatting with Etienne more, what you should do.
What is Willemsen?
Yeah, exactly. That's a common search term too.
There's so is SEO still a thing?
It is. It's it's not as much. It is. So there's 2 spaces that really exist, I'd say. It's in the customer acquisition lead gen space. There's heavy hitters in that space who have built out these massive operations. And then there is the Valley crowd that plays heavily in it, and the ones that can be like really involved in that. Obviously it's like Quora, places like that. You're probably seeing them start to eclipse like Yahoo Answers, all the garbage that used to be up there. Like they're getting huge amounts of traffic. Like a lot of other places are pretty well dialed in, but we could go on to talking about traffic channels for a long time. SEO is, it still works, but it requires some investment. If you're super niche-y, you can actually do it still. But if you're trying to sell like Air Jordans or something, like forget about it.
I've noticed looking at my AdWords phrases, it's pretty enlightening how boring the phrases are really, and how I'm showing up, like CTO mentoring. You would think that there's other places to go for that.
Right. I would think of you like circus tricks, like how do I get out of parole hearings, that type of thing.
So the other thing I'll never forget about you is you hosted one dinner and I'm still friends with every single person who went to that.
Yeah.
How do you make friends?
I generally pay them.
You pay? Was that a paid crowd?
I was paid. Yeah, you were the only one. Tossed down there. Figured you'd show up.
What do you think of the San Diego tech community?
It's the only tech community I really know well.
Mm.
I've spent plenty of time popping up to the Bay for a lot of conferences. Know a bunch of people up there. I've gone up to LA a good bit, the Santa Monica scene, kind of poked around, but I've like developed as somebody who knows tech, quote unquote, knows it here. So it's okay. What I do think is good is that there's more people down here, at least than the Bay, who are building out non-venture funded companies.
Mm.
And the reason I think that's actually pretty cool is the fact that, you build out a venture funded company, you just need such a massive outcome. And there's no in between, right? There's no like building like a $5 million business in that case, So I think there's a lot of, there's enough trickle down and expertise in San Diego where people are like still pretty legit technologists, but they're not building these swinging for the fences companies. And so they're probably a lot more accessible. And it's, there's a lot of interesting, cool little places here, but you don't tend to know about them, right? It's lots of like, they're just, a lot of them are stretching out in the endless office parks going up north towards, up towards Escondido and North County.
It is kind of shocking for me how we have all these pockets of people in it who all seem to be advocates for the little area they're in, when really we're all part of one scene.
Mm-hmm.
We should be builders.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah. Well, I think what's been good is actually the Startup San Diego. That is a great organization.
Are you involved in that?
Not this year. It is time consuming, but I'll go and hang out and drink.
One sort of final sort of thought I want to touch on is what advice would you have for for a company, especially maybe the CTOs of smaller companies, and maybe not just the CTO, but when you are building your product and you're struggling with that customer acquisition, I often wonder, is it because I didn't build something that the people want, or is it because I don't have enough money to bombard them with enough brainwashing so that they will want it?
So that's a really good question, and I think it's generally the latter, unfortunately. So it depends. I mean, it depends on what you're building. If you're building B2C or you're building B2B, that's a totally different world. Because like B2B, you can tend to get in front of people and get a value prop across, where B2C, you're not going to touch those people for the most part. I think the low-hanging fruit was picked kind of like early to mid 2000s on the B2B stuff, where you're like, oh, wow, this is really elegant, or it works really well, or is like, this is great and it solves my problem. Yeah. But now, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to like, create the 40th, Airbnb for dogs, right? Like, and then how are you going to actually like market that thing? Yeah. So I think you do, if you're going to go B2C, you have to have a war chest, or a lot of niche strategy, and you shouldn't really be focusing on product so much as I hate to say that as a product manager. Be focusing on marketing, because you're probably not rolling something out that is so. If you can't work out the customer acquisition in a B2C company, you're screwed. Like, you will not ever, no matter how good your product is, unless it is like, you won't have the money to make the product as good as you need to make it to just make it viral.
Just make it. And that's what I learned the hard way with one of my startups. Was I always thought, man, it's really cheap. I really built this product on the cheap. I think it was like $60,000 or $70,000. And but I realized I actually needed like $500,000 because building the tech was the easy part. Bringing in people to know how to market that and how to get that out in front of the right eyeballs. That's. I mean.
And in addition, how much time do we have? Are we getting?
No, keep going.
Plenty. Because we could go. Actually, there's plenty of things we can talk about. So first of all, a lot of folks in marketing, you're not dealing with like A-level talent. I'll just say that. Like, in plenty of the places. Not that I'm A-level talent either. I spend a lot of time forgetting what I just went and walked into this room for, and then have to go back out and then be like, that was it. Go back. But that's like a real issue though. If you're really trying to start companies, and you're like, I need a marketer. I need several marketers. A lot of time you're not pulling from like quantitative, hard-hitting folks. They're like, and this is not the case everywhere, but a lot of times it's like, I want to be Don Draper. And that's not going to cut it now, because you need people who are like digging in on like, what is your customer acquisition cost? Like, are you, which of these blog posts really did deliver value? Like, and, so you need somebody who's like looking at this from a much more quantitative perspective while maintaining still that maybe Don Drapery customer sense of like what actually like set somebody off, what drew them in. Like, so it's become a much more like, there's a lot of experimentation. You see all these growth marketers now, right? And that's like, as far as a skill, I don't even know if I'd say it's a skill, but like what you need in a lot of marketing talent, and my point now, or my view now, is somebody who is very experimental, can deploy experiments, measure them, and then act or kill, and then just keep going through and iterating until they see something that works, right? So that you don't want somebody who's like, this is my one specialty, and because if they can't get that one specialty to work, if they're really good at SEO or something else, like, you've got an issue. So, I mean, marketing is a complex one, and it's really taken on a life of its own. Like you see on these customer acquisition companies where their business is marketing, they're pretty advanced. Like, they're not screwing around.
And it's always, I think it's always a lot harder work than you think it's going to be.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the things where it's like
I kind of want to be like, okay, you guys do the marketing, and then that, no, we need you to, go through the cycle with us.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And plus, like, you've got to tie them deeply. These days, you got to like tie them deeply into product and sales and all that stuff, and everybody's like pulling in the same direction too.
When should I bring in a marketing agency? Because to me, that's just a default no. So let's say I'm like a $0 to $5 million company, or let's start with like 0 to $1 million.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm struggling. Not fund. Let's say that's revenue. So let's say but I'm struggling to really get that customer traction. When am I saying as a CEO, CTO, when am I saying, oh yes, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in an agency and have them help me with my messaging, my branding, or when am I saying, oh, this is a sales problem where or this is a product problem. When do I know that I'm missing the mark and should bring in an agency? And I want to dovetail that to the fact that you kind of alluded to. There's a lot of people calling themselves agencies and calling themselves marketers, and really that they don't know what they're doing.
I'd say that is a significant portion. It's actually a problem. So a lot of people like reach out to maybe on like, hey, can you recommend an agency and stuff? There's very few people I trust with the recommendations, because, hey, you spend a weekend sitting on your couch watching some YouTube videos and like take an AdWords course online and start a marketing agency. Boom. It's an issue. Like, I see people burn through a ton of cash as a result. Like, a lot of the analytics consulting I was doing, I was just kind of being like, this isn't working. This isn't working. This isn't, because if you're looking at it from an actual like full perspective where you're like, okay, putting money here, this is what's pumping through your funnel, this is what's closing out in the back end, this is the actual revenue, this is not stacking up. And people don't tend to do that. Yeah, because that's a lot of work.
Because that's that's an analyst's work,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
So, and then, it's like, so if you're a 0 to 1 million, like, like ARR, I mean, that is, I don't know, I wouldn't burn money in a marketing agency, but like, I would hope if you're going to be in that space, if you're going to be a company that is really based on building up, like if your marketing is going to be essential to your success, you should have marketers on team. Like, that should be a core component of your company. If it's not, if it's more of like a sales operation or something where it's like, let's say it's like B2B sales, and it's like you should be focusing on bringing on somebody with a legitimate Rolodex who can open doors for you, right? It's a very different situation. I wouldn't recommend it for that B2B company being like, hire an ad agency to help you build mind share in the space. That's to me a waste of time.
So, what are your views on marketing automation tools?
So they can be good. With all this stuff, it has gotten more advanced. It's not out of the box, So HubSpot is really the most popular one out there for the smaller guys.
Hard to use, man.
Yeah.
I mean, not, like Infusionsoft, the training that they want to, as part of the deal, they want you to go through training. And it's this stuff is just hard.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. It's definitely a lot more full metal jacket than people would think. And that's the issue. I see tons of companies that build out great products, and it's just like they fall flat on their face because they can't market them effectively. Again, like I think really the build it and they will come, feel the dream situation is like a decade ago.
Yeah.
So you do have a situation where a lot of folks just can't get companies off the ground. I mean, I've seen it multiple times where it's like that is the gating factor.
And then you see the counter as well, where companies with brilliant marketing agencies and really shitty products are able to still do well because the marketing message is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that's always going to win out because people definitely do realize the crappy products and stuff. Yeah. But it happens all the time, right? Especially if you're that 0 to 1 million company and your competitor just raises this huge round, right? And their investors are like, all right, you've got your product built. Now it's time to just freaking grow. Not only are you going to be losing customers, right, which is a huge potential customers because the other competitor is taking over your space, they've also flooded the space with money. So if you're in a situation where it's like AdWords or something, that's a marketplace. So, what just happened, the demand went way up for AdWords. So then all of a sudden the prices shoot up, right? Because the supply stays flat. And that's a situation where people get muscled out by a competitor coming in, even though they were doing everything right. They just can't afford what they were previously doing. So that happens too. It's like really what CMOs should be doing is looking at their marketing as a portfolio, right? Like, and saying, if I'm investing money in this channel, is it working? And if you're hiring agencies, if you're investing in content, if you're doing whatever, that's the CEO's job at the end of the day. Is whatever they're doing, they're trying to put money into this engine and get more money out of it, right? But on a smaller scale, the CMO should be focused on that from a marketing perspective.
And I think I heard recently that the CMO is like the shortest lived role in the C-suite, where the turnover is the highest in the C-suite.
Yeah,
it's such a tough one.
Well, it's interesting because before I went to this job, so I was like tapping out of consulting. I was very tired of running clients down for bills and stuff. And the next step would have been, okay, either build an agency and turn this into a real business or do something else. So I was applying for a bunch of product roles, and then they'd see my experience and be like, yes, that'd be cool. But, do you think maybe you could like help the growth team? And I actually was really trying to avoid that because if you end up in like, a head of growth type of role and stuff, like, it's awesome to be able to like jump in and be like, hey, I want to deliver for you and stuff. But again, it is something that is very, very nebulous. Like, are you, okay, let's take product. Are you trying to talk to a bunch of clients? Are you trying to understand the economics of the business? And you're trying to then build out a product that makes sense for those clients and will make the company money? There's still a lot of open-ended stuff there. But not to the level of like, can you find a profitable customer acquisition channel? Because that is something where it's like, maybe not, because you're just going hunting, right? And you don't know what you're going to return. It's not like you're a good hunter. You're going off into an uncharted land. You don't know if there's lions. You don't know if there's any sort of game.
No, it's a tough one. So I loved what you said earlier about finding a marketer who's experimental.
I think it's essential.
Can execute / implement whatever they're experimenting with.
Or at least pull the people in who can.
And he's able to then measure accurately and then able to repeat.
Exactly. You're iterating through, right?
I love that.
Create a test, execute it, and repeat.
Ryan Willemsen. Yeah. I think our time's up. Do you have any books that you're reading right now, or that you can recommend? Or
right now, well, I have plenty to recommend. I'm always reading like 7 books at a time as well. So, yeah, in terms of books for your crew,
just what
the hard thing about hard things is like the mega classic, right? And actually, I've been finding myself, didn't think I'd have to do this, recommending again and again these days, being like, have you read the Lean Startup? You know, that's like the bedrock of this business, right? But I actually see that on the engineering side a lot. People kind of just being like, MVPs are not exciting. We want to build this thing, enterprise, rock solid, incredibly scalable. So I think those two books, like if you have to read them.
You're right. I think it's for a while there, back in the early 2000s, people would be talking about the E-myth. And then after a while, you realize, I don't think you've actually read the E-myth. I think you know what the idea is. And Lean Startup is a pretty technical book in terms of, you know, the process you need to follow and the assumptions and the measurable results. So very good.
Totally.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions for me, bro? Still nothing?
You know, like, I mean, what do you see? How do you see this space evolving? Like, you know, when you're rolling out there with CTOs, what's been the overall change over the last 2 years you've seen when they're working with product? Like, how has that evolved? Because it's such like a new role, right? The product role.
Yes, I see a healthy confusion around when to hire a product manager and when not to do that. So I love the CTO who has got a strong product bend. It's a bit of a unicorn, like when a UX person can also write some serious code.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find that the relationship, just like some people find it hard to define what the CTO does at whatever phase of the company, the CTOs, I think, are often looking at me saying, hey, do you think I should be hiring a product manager? Should I get better at product management? Is it supposed to be me? Who should they report to? To the CEO? Is it to me? So I think the organizational design is asking sort of those, well, we don't know where this always fits in. And it's always subjective then, obviously, to the makeup of the company. But that's what I'm seeing. But I'm loving the conversations I'm having with the more product-oriented people. There's definitely a difference. You know, fighting for the product, the voice of customer, where the CTO, depending on the company size, you know, fighting for you know, technology alignment and strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was a good question.
Hey,
I thought y'all were gonna say, "I ain't got no questions, man."
Yeah, no, I've got so many questions. We could talk till the wee hours of the morning.
Thank you, Ryan. No, that was fascinating. I want to go so deep on this stuff.
Next time. For the folks listening at home, be well.
Next time. Thanks, brother. Cheers.
Ciao.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the CTOstudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.